This is our Lenten lunch and learn during this week of Holy Week. As always, I'll give it just a little bit of time if people would like to log in and begin watching. But if you're watching this a little bit later, just as a reminder, I don't spend a lot of time waiting because I don't know how many to expect because everyone's schedules are so different every day. But today we're going to be talking about the cross. Again, this is Holy Week. Each day of the week is considered holy. Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday. Then we have Maundy, Thursday, and then, of course, Good Friday coming up, and even Holy Saturday as we have that day in between Good Friday and Easter, Resurrection Sunday, where we celebrate that the story of Jesus didn't end on Friday, but continues. We have a couple directions we could go today. I think I'm going to spend our time talking about the cross. This Thursday, during our worship service for Maundy Thursday, I'm primarily going to be focusing on the meal itself and the significance of Jesus using the Passover meal and reinterpreting it and giving it new meaning through his life and the story of God now. Of course, well, I'll save it for Thursday. But so today, instead, I wanted to talk about the cross. I'm going to read a little bit of how Jesus was arrested, and then we'll get into some of the details about the cross itself and crucifixion. And over these next 10 minutes or so, just touch on a few things about that. So if you're watching live on either Facebook or YouTube, you can make a comment and I'll be able to respond later or even during. And then if you make a comment later, I like to read those and I'll respond if there's a question or something that I can clarify. Okay, we are in, Luke chapter 23. So this is after Jesus has been arrested in the garden. So we are on, we consider Thursday evening, Thursday in the middle of the night. Jesus has been arrested. He's been taken to the high priest Caiaphas's house. This is the point where Jesus has been followed by some of his disciples, including Peter. Peter has denied Jesus 3 times. And then verse 66 of chapter 22 says, when the day came, so the night has passed. When the day came, the assembly of the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, gathered together, and they brought him to their council. They said, if you are the Messiah, tell us. He replied, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I question you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. All of them asked, are you then the Son of God? He said to them, you say that I am. And they said, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. So then after that, in chapter 23 now, Jesus is taken before Pilate. Pilate hears their accusations. They say, we found that this man has been perverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to the emperor. Which, again, these are somewhat half-truths of what took place, right? And saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king. Then Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? He answered, you say so. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and crowds, I find no basis for an accusation against this man. But they were insistent and said, he stirs up the people by teaching throughout all Judea. True. From Galilee, where he began, even to this place. Also true. Jesus did that, right? When Pilate heard this, he asked whether this man was Galilean, and he learned that he was under Herod's jurisdiction. He sent him off to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. These are some things I touched on Sunday. how many places Jesus has been dragged. Jesus has been taken from the Garden of Gethsemane to Caiaphas's house, the high priest's house. I'm going to show you again a map of of Jerusalem. Pull up. We have. Make sure my windows are where they need to be. So down here is the pool of Siloam. And then this is probably where the council met, was up in this area here, because that's the temple. And the Garden of Gethsemane is off to the right. Caiaphas's house is in this general area here, is what we believe. And there now is a church dedicated to Peter, because that's where Peter would have denied Jesus 3 times. And part of the excavation of that church discovered the church, while the church was being built, excavation of that area found some caves and some areas that maybe people would have been held there. Even some places dug into the rock where ropes could have been passed through and tied to somebody. So it's possible that we have a site where Jesus was arrested and then kept overnight there at the high priest's house. And so moving on, we're on chapter 23. Jesus is there. He's been arrested and moved back and forth between Pilate and Herod, and then Herod back to Pilate. And then finally, the crowd's unrelenting. They say, we have to crucify him. And they ask then for the release of Barabbas. Barabbas was scheduled to die. It's not clear how long Barabbas and the others with him on the 2 others who were also set to be crucified had been arrested, and how long ago this insurrection had taken place, how long ago the murder. Most historians would look and say that Rome wasn't going to be sitting around for a long time and talking about crucifixion. If somebody was guilty of a crime, they're going to be crucified right away. There was no sense in waiting and dragging it out. One of the important things I think to consider when we look at crucifixion and Rome is to not apply our justice system, one where we aspire to fairness and justice and for things to be balanced. We don't want to apply our idea of justice to what Rome was doing. So when you look at the 3 on the cross, and I mean Barabbas and the 2 others who were set to be executed, and you say, well, clearly then they deserved it, because we would only hope to put people on death row who would deserve death, that penalty of death for their crime. And so clearly they must be guilty too. That, again, we're applying our idea of justice to Rome, and Rome didn't operate that way. Rome was terrible. Rome was horrible. They didn't care about fairness. They weren't going to look through the details and say, is this a fair punishment or not? To them, this was another way to show power. And ultimately, the cross was about power. It was about Rome showing their authority. In one group that rebels, that there were 6,000 that survived this rebellion against Rome. And what did Rome do? They slaughtered them by putting them all on a cross. 6,000, they say, crucified at once along a 120-mile stretch. Again, to show to anyone passing through, listen, if you try to stand up to Rome, this is what's going to happen. Not only are we going to kill you, but we're going to make it so gruesome that your bodies will hang there. We're going to humiliate you. And that's really what the cross was. It was humiliating. It was no way for anyone to die. Not only the pain of it, but the shame it brought on you. So the cross. So we have, I'm going to share that screen again, that image. We have Golgotha here. This would be Herod's palace, Herod the Great's palace, where Pilate was likely staying. This is the temple on this side. Now, again, our best understanding is that they took Jesus outside the city gates and into a place called Golgotha, or the skull. Now, we don't have those locations for sure, but tradition teaches us that it's in that area. Now, in that spot stands the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and you walk up a narrow set of stairs, and on in there where they built against the cliff and the rock face there is a spot where they believe right in here Jesus's cross would have been put. It's hard to see in this picture, I know, but you can see that these are just pieces of glass here, and that's rock underneath the glass, and that in under here that they've put somewhat of a shrine to is where they believe that the cross would have sat. Now, again, it's tradition. It does not mean it's fact, but they've become holy places for pilgrims to Jerusalem to see for themselves. Crucifixion itself is hard to know exactly what it looked like and how it worked. There's, we have our traditional views. I'll show you a traditional view here. Images through the ages. Traditionally, these are probably the pictures you're used to seeing of Jesus on Jesus on a cross here, arms stretched out wide, and then feet one over the other, nailed to a cross. Often there is both a long vertical plank and then the horizontal one, and that there's space above, so it doesn't go all the way to the top. Some drawings and renderings the people imagine might have that look a little bit different. Some of the earliest graffiti we have, I'll show you this one first, of the cross itself. This is maybe from anywhere between 50 AD and 200. But this is mocking, is it Alexamenos or something? I forget the name. I should have written it down. But it says he worships his God. And Jesus is here depicted on a wall in Rome. Graffiti. Here's the individual they're talking about worshiping their God, Jesus being on the cross, his head replaced with a donkey head. This is an outline of that. And so we get a sense that early Christians, again, sharing their faith, were talking about the cross. And this graffiti on a wall was making a mockery of it. Again, replacing the head of Jesus with a donkey's head, mocking the individual who is worshiping. In this instance, we have a cross that has somewhat of a vertical plank along with the horizontal. And in this one, the vision, the person who drew it, carved it into the stone there, understood it to be something that somebody stood on. That's possible. Again, there was no general way of Rome crucifying. This is one understanding of what crucifixion might have looked like, that people weren't necessarily nailed with their hands, but tied up on top, but with the nails going through the heels. Gruesome, I know. I think it's helpful, though, to understand how humiliating this was. This is a picture of the bone fragments that we found, and part of my understanding of why the nails would have gone in that way. So this is a heel bone and the nail going through the side of it. And the belief is, I understand of at least this bone fragment, and we just don't have any to show, but that the nail wouldn't have been long enough to go through two heel bones. And so it's very unlikely that the heels would have been touching, but rather separate and on either side of the cross. And then back again to this, the depictions of Jesus on the cross through history. This is that graffiti, again, about 250 to 200. It's hard to date. But then we have through history, and of course, we get a lot of Western influence as the time goes on, European influence in the way that Jesus is depicted, his far more pale skin, but also just the artistry of the clothing that people are wearing in those pictures as it continues. So again, when we look at the cross and we look at Jesus on the cross, and we see what the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem wanted to shame Jesus. This was not just about getting rid of Jesus. This was about embarrassing him, putting shame on him, of giving him a death that nobody should deserve, and using the power of Rome to do it. And so when we look at, who are the enemies, right? Tax collectors were seen as enemies. They're the ones constantly put down in scripture. And why would Jesus dine with tax collectors? And it goes on, because those people, the tax collectors, are part of the Roman Empire and they're helping Rome. Well, and then all of a sudden we've got the religious leaders in Rome doing what? They're partnering with, Jewish leaders in Jerusalem partnering with Rome. They've let go of everything that they've been taught, and they know the law, they know scripture, they know what God desires of them, and they know what history has said when people have come in, when other nations have come in, and the work that their ancestors have gone through to reestablish themselves in Jerusalem. And all of a sudden they say, well, we've got this one guy who's preaching a gospel, a good news that we don't want him here. We want him gone. He's got too much of a following. He's too dangerous. Let's get rid of him. It's mind-blowing that how far they went to get rid of Jesus. The steps that they took in partnering with this evil empire of Rome, and how much they have forgotten their own roots. And so it is that, I mean, we understand on a level that Jesus gave himself up to this, but also it's so challenging when we see the lengths that sin took people, the distances that it brought them to, forgetting everything that they are. And in there is that message to us too, of how far our sin can take us, of forgetting who we are, of breaking off relationships and losing the knowledge of who we are and whose we are. The Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, who were they? Well, all of a sudden they seemed like Romans. They didn't seem like the people of God. Sin does the same with us. Before we realize it, we are not the people of God. We don't look like Christians. We don't look like followers of Jesus, because our actions, the way we live, how we talk, who we align ourselves with, doesn't look anything like Jesus. It's so dangerous when we begin to see violence, hatred, anger as reasonable means to get what we need and what we want. When we let go of the hope we have in Jesus and say, well, this is the way it needs to get done. And so this Holy Week, as we journey to the cross, and this final week towards the cross, the challenge for us is to see ourselves in the story and to realize that those Jewish leaders, the folks in Jerusalem, are not much different than we are, that we're all susceptible to falling into the same trap of allowing sin to creep into our hearts, into our lives, into our minds, and to lead us down a path that we will find shame in, and lose who Jesus is. Because we're live and I'm wrapping up, Laura Curley has shared, I'm going to post it here. She writes, this all makes me wonder where I would have been if I were in Jerusalem at the time of Christ's crucifixion. Would I have been one who called for his death? Would I have been one who wasn't interested in justice, but only going along, continues with the crowd? Or would I have been a godly human? Yeah, Laura, it is the challenge, isn't it, to know? I don't know. I guess we can answer that by how do we live today? Do we live by following Christ today, or do we put Christ aside in favor of following others and following what they tell us we should do? And so, all right, I will see you all on Thursday evening at 7 p.m., either on live on Facebook or YouTube, or in the sanctuary. We will depart on Thursday in silence, just as they did, to go to the garden It's lead us into Good Friday. And then here's my if I don't have a chance to say it again, here's my encouragement to you, not only on Good Friday but Holy Saturday. Holy Saturday gets overlooked, but spend Holy Saturday in some reflection too, in the silence. Just like the disciples, they didn't know what was next, and even though we know the resurrection is coming, there is that moment, that reminder of what it feels like to feel hopeless. And I hope it makes Sunday all the more powerful when we realize what Jesus has done for us and what God has done through Jesus Christ in showing us God's amazing love and forgiveness. I will see you all again on Thursday. Have a great week.